Welcome to today's video. Although this has only indirectly to do with Star Wars The Old Republic, it is still a video about Star Wars in the end. I want to talk about my ideas for a technically possible Star Wars MMORPG for the future gaming community. I will talk about what the previous games, single-player games included, did well. Another point of the video will be why I wanted to come up with a very rough draft for a possible concept. What were the reasons anyway? Lastly, I'm going to talk about what my ideas actually are and what might be a possible way of implementing them. Hey everyone, thanks for clicking on this video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like and a comment and subscribe to my channel if you didn't already do that. When I think about Star Wars games, I think about the nostalgic ones. Video games I played as a kid. Lego Star Wars, Pod Racing, X-Wing Alliance, etc. I loved those games. Although the latter two ones were when I was around 6 or 7 years old, so I didn't understand everything happening there. But I still liked it. Lego Star Wars came later when I was about 10 or 12 years old. Not so sure anymore. However, thinking about online Star Wars games is a bit harder. I remember like two. One was Star Wars Galaxies and the other one is Star Wars The Old Republic. The first game, Star Wars Galaxies, was released 2004 and was available until 2011 to make room for the upcoming game Star Wars The Old Republic. Both shared the same problems regarding users, the customers. Galaxies lost subscribers because World of Warcraft was holding onto being number one, funneling a lot of the potential users. To compete with that, Sony Entertainment tried to change the core of the game, so it resembled the popular game. However, with that, a lot of the previous freedom got lost. Players left the game and eventually it got closed.
I wanted it so fucking bad. I just can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man. All I wanted to do was, like, I was fucking lonely. I wanted to just fucking stream and have a good time, man. Have a good game. I hate my life. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
The Old Republic kind of has a similar problem. The difference is that it never had this much freedom in the first place. You couldn't multi-class, for example. The Old Republic had also another problem, as it was kind of a successor of the previous game. It was highly anticipated to be at least as good as the previous one, with the same mechanics and core stuff like the pre-enhancement update version of Galaxies. It didn't fulfill this requirement, so many subscriptions weren't renewed. The game needed to get new players, so they made lots of marketing, changed the model to free to play with an optional subscription. The optional is in exclamation marks. Over the years, they changed a lot of things to keep it modern. Lighting got renewed in 2019 and the new launcher came out around 2016. My problem was that they changed the powers layout. I'm not even sure if there's actually anything different than the layout, but the good thing is that they stopped charging you for learning your skills. That was absolutely a pain. Although they represent the game as a free-to-play game, they punish users for not paying for, well, their free game. Expansions are only available through payment and are the only way to increase the level cap, which is needed to play rankeds. They strayed both further away from the customers. And why? Money. What else?
Espresso. What else?
The age of the game is obviously visible. Although they try to improve on it, you cannot hide it. But that's not big of an issue for my part. I'm still able to play it. However, many players don't feel the same way, and a lot of possible newcomers think the same. The textures got improved on, and over the years the faces got more details. However, that counts only for the story and content later in the game. That's my biggest concern regarding graphics. They didn't rework all of the content, just added a new one without the same quality of art. It's just not consistent, and that consistency is what could have made it a difference. The physics engine is limited, probably barely dynamic. Nowadays that's not a good sign, as games unrelated of their realism have a dynamic and plausible physics engine. Classes in Galaxies were at the beginning very open. It was possible to go healer and monk. Multiclassing was something very special. Not many games allowed that. The Old Republic went the lazy route with that. Classes were faction locked, basically mirrors of each other. Effectively, there were 4 different classes, just very well hidden or packaged. But they also added subclasses, so each class had 2 specialties to focus on. The faction system in the Old Republic is binary. You are either Imperial or Republic. No in-betweens or anything. This binary thinking made sense in that time. Nowadays it's very disliked. We know that there are independent factions which are even represented in the game, but we aren't able to play as them effectively. We infiltrate the Revenites, but cannot return to them in any way. Yes, we have the title, but what good does this do? Factions aren't a roleplay only thing. They should contribute to how the world looks at you. Thinking about it, the games after and before Star Wars Galaxies and Star Wars The Old Republic were all very narrow in terms of themes, or the game were just single or co-op player games. Of course, there is a Star Wars community. However, the problem is that there are many types inside the community. We got the novelists reading, writing the novels very passionately, the movie-only watchers, the ones watching the TV shows as well, the people who play video games, and that category has 2 main subcategories: the single players and the multiplayers. I do like both kind of games, so maybe there's even a third one, kind of a hybrid, if we look at what I played before. But I need the socializing with people in the online community. I want to represent myself in the game, either through a character resembling me or a character totally different from the norm. This cannot be done in single player games, at least not always, because no one is there to discuss stuff with me. Of course, I can just join a voice chat while playing, but that's just not the same thing. In single player games, the focus on the character is very different than the focus in a multiplayer game, especially MMORPGs. In the first one, the character is most of the time already created, the background story is defined, the look is somewhat defined most of the time, skills are defined. I can relate to that character, but I can't be that character. It's a philosophical problem. How can you be yourself if you cannot choose it for yourself? But to put it simply, I relate to characters which aren't me, and I create characters to be someone. This is my take on this subject. Thinking about what actually was good or interesting in previous games is not that easy at all. For some games it's 1 or 2 things, yes, but there are still points I would need to address, especially on games like Star Wars The Force Unleashed. But first, I will push the focus over to Star Wars The Old Republic and later mention other Star Wars games and briefly talk about those as well. The things I appreciated when I played The Old Republic was the story. I mentioned this already a few times in my previous videos, but for those who didn't watch them, I mentioned other aspects of that point, so just keep on watching. The plot of Star Wars The Old Republic was absolutely baller. I loved the original main stories. They were diverse, interesting, and very well written. Everything followed the basic guideline perfectly. Even the planet stories were pretty well done. The choices were very different, giving the game at least 2 major differences for possible endings. The plot for the first 2 expansions were cool as well. I I loved how they implemented the new planets and still gave players some ground to explore. Meeting new characters, working with the enemy faction, all was possible because they had a common enemy. Rise of the Hot Cartel made the game interesting because we got to see a new major enemy which wasn't the Imperials. Shadow of Revan was interesting, well, because of Revan. Revan is probably one of the most hyped characters in the Star Wars universe, and that for a reason. He's mysterious, strong in the Force, and was both a Jedi and a Sith. During the whole time I played the story, or well, the game itself, I felt immersed. As long as I didn't look at the chat, especially right now in this year in time, but that's another problem. I might come back to that if you want to. Write me in the comment section if you would like a video about the current community during and outside of eventful times. I felt like I was that character. I felt empathy and or hatred for the people around me. Good thing it isn't VR. I don't want to hit my PC or anything else randomly thinking I would swing a lightsaber. The character creator was pretty good for existing in 2011. It had many options for faces, eyes and other stuff. The problem was that they were redundant. However, that was a problem many games faced during the time. It wasn't common to have stuff as dynamic as nowadays. There were many races available, if you were a subscriber at least, else you had like 3 or so. Still pretty okay, the races weren't locked by other things than subscriptions or buffet-like payment. The only kind of faction-locked race were the Sabraks. However, with subscription or by buying them in the cash shop, you were able to play both Sabrak versions on either faction. No biggie at all. Anyway, the character creator wasn't impressive though. It was remarkably average, UI-wise and customization. If you look at the amount of categories, few would argue that the art was bad for a game made in 2011. With its beta around 2009-2010, it wasn't fully HD, but it was still good to look at. The textures weren't overly fancy and mostly just did the job, but there were some iterations which made the game pretty good looking from a more mediocre look. The other things were the costumes. Those are not bad at all. Some look so good, others would look good with different colors, which is of course possible if you have dice in your inventory. Most of them were kind of similar, but the differences lie in the details. Over time we got a huge amount of options, and since the update in 2015 or 2016, we got the possibility to save costumes as skins, which wouldn't mess with your stats. Great for RP purposes and well for most players as well. The last thing Star Wars The Old Republic did great was the music. I already mentioned this in my first video about Star Wars The Old Republic, and so you might want to watch that and listen to the examples there. Of course, I can't just talk about one single game. There were other games as well, which were pretty popular or at least somewhat well known. If we want to implement a way for VR, virtual reality or motion control support, we should look at Star Wars Kinect. The game wasn't very good, more like one big disappointment.
I can't believe this shit is real, bro. I can't believe this shit is real.
But it had its fun moments, and mostly because it was a Kinect game. Motion control and VR are super fun technologies, and maybe for some people it might be an alternative way of playing a game. Two pretty old games were Star Wars X-Wings Alliance and Star Wars Rogue Squadron 3D. They were released pre-2000, so most of the people wouldn't know about those games. I played them as a kid and was in love. It was pretty complex in terms of story, and the space and air battles were absolutely great. They felt so good, and I still like to play them sometimes, even years later. Star Wars Pod Racing was cool, fun, and on many platforms available. I had it on my Game Boy, and the cartridge of the game even had a rumble function. The computer game was great, and I still blame my older cousin for breaking the disc.
A very low IQ person
Good thing Steam exists, but it took a while until Steam actually had it ready to download. There will be no Star Wars The Old Republic without arguably the best Star Wars games of all times, the Knights of the Old Republic. Great story, great controls, great Annie, and everything. Don't need to tell more about that franchise, I guess, or I know pretty much everyone knows it. Lastly, we got one of the more modern approaches of Star Wars. It's cool, but no masterpiece. There are many interesting aspects regarding plot, but the most interesting part about the game is the action combat system, which is implemented in both games. Star Wars The Force Unleashed was available for the most platforms, with the coolest one being the Wii. Why? Motion control, of course. The original Wii, not the Wii U, was a great thing. There were things I didn't like not having the ability of play games in full HD, but whatever, it was still fun. Back to the game, Force Unleashed was fun to play, especially in my younger years. The gameplay looked great because of the fluency of the attacks and the animations. First game was kind of better because it was less easier in terms of skill use, but I liked the new skill tree system, which was intriguing when it was new at the time. I think that's about it. What do you think? Which Star Wars games did you find interesting and as something usable for later games? Write your answer in the comment section and let the Force guide you. This video is a two-parter, so you might want to watch the next one as well, because that one is gonna be very interesting as well. If you watched this video until now, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time and attention. It's a really nice gesture and I absolutely appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, it would be so cool of you if you dropped a like, and any input or thought is welcome. Just hit me up in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any future videos. I have different social media platforms I'm somewhat actively involved with, and maybe I will stream again this or next week. Just look through the links in the description and find what you're looking for. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye!